So what is next? Set this up. A federal judge did find James Uthmeier in civil contempt over a federal judge's ruling that put on hold a new state law that makes it a crime for people living in the U.S. illegally to enter the state of Florida. So the judge holding the Attorney General in contempt, they say, for violating that law. So we want to look into what the next steps are, where things go from here, and what this all means. And so joining us live now via Zoom is defense attorney Jose Rivas, who often joins us here on Fox 35 News Plus. Always appreciate his perspective. And Jose, we appreciate you joining us this morning here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you for having me here today.
So we hear that the Attorney General has been held in civil contempt. Just explain to folks what this means.
Right. So there's a difference between civil and criminal contempt. In criminal contempt, they could go a little bit farther out. They can, put you in jail or give her heavy fines. This is a civil contempt, and the purpose of it is not to punish, but to bring him into compliance. And that's the reason we see a judge ordering him to report every 2 weeks. We want to make sure that you are compliant. We need to see some reports. We're not here to punish you, but we want to make sure that you comply with our ruling.
So are there further steps that if this isn't done, that the judge could take here?
Well, I mean, if he continues to not follow the law, what could happen is they could actually put him in jail. It's very seldom that they do that, but they could put him in jail, but only to the point where he says, yes, I'm going to comply. It's kind of like child support. Sometimes there could be a writ, so to speak, and you go to jail. It's a way to bring you in front of the judge. He's going to ask you, why did you comply with the law? And that's what they're trying to do. It could be fines, it could be jail, but certainly we want him to comply. We're going to put in steps to be able to, that he can report and make sure that he follows through.
One of the things that the ruling from the judge talks about is the Attorney General's defiant posture, not just in his actions officially, but also in a number of interviews and things like that. So, what kind of leads to a decision like this for a judge to hold the Attorney General in civil contempt? What is it that what factors are they kind of considering?
Well, it's all about due process. So we have a federal judge that's saying, hey, listen, you cannot put those people in jail. You cannot arrest them. You're taking away their due process. So we have to remember, states can give more rights to individuals, right? But they cannot give any less than the government or the federal government entails them to receive. In other words, you can't restrict what the government is giving you or what the federal government. The federal government is telling you to not arrest this. So the state cannot restrict, cannot overpower the judge's federal decision. So they can give him more, but they cannot restrict what the federal government is giving them the power. So we want him to comply. We don't want him to. And again, it's a force of authority as well, too. I mean, here you have a federal judge giving a ruling, and you have somebody who's supposed to be under, telling law enforcement, don't comply with the ruling. It's quite disrespect to the court and to the judicial process.
And we have had a response from the Attorney General. I want to pull that up here on Twitter. He tweeted this out yesterday evening, it was, after this news began to break, saying if being held in contempt is what it costs to defend the rule of law and stand firmly behind President Trump's agenda on illegal immigration, so be it. And my understanding is that there is still a decision to be made on this case when it comes to kind of the merits of their argument that the judges putting this on hold shouldn't have gone as far as it did, but this compliance now is going to be required at least until that decision is made.
The reality is that he's not the rule of law. In other words, he must comply with the law of the federal courts, which he has to comply with. It could come to some point where if he continues to defy the system, at the end of the day, he's an attorney. He has a bar card just like any other attorney, and he could be reported to the Florida bar. They could put some kind of, reprimand him, so to speak. So there could be a bar complaint. At the end of the day, he has a bar card, and our oath is to follow the law. And by simply defying this temporary injunction from the federal judge, it's literally saying, hey, listen, I took an oath, but I'm not going to abide by the oath that I took.
What Jose, you are a criminal defense attorney, and I know have seen some of the impacts of the immigration crackdown in court. What happens to these people who were arrested under this law? To those arrests that were made when the judge said, you shouldn't be making these arrests under this law, but we know there were some made. What happens to those cases?
Oh, surprisingly enough, we actually received what we call a no information. There was a case yesterday, a gentleman that we were representing, and the state dismissed the charges. What happened was these individuals were arrested, so to speak, illegally, or what we say now, hey, they were arrested illegally, so to speak. So they're held in custody because they have what we call an ICE hold. So they can't post bond. If they post bond, immigration will take them. Now that the charges have been dropped, immigration, because there's an ICE hold, will come over and will pick them up. So in other words, what are the resources? And there could be some federal or some civil lawsuits later down the road in regards to this. But the issue is they were exposed, they were ran through the system. That's what we're seeing right now every single day. We have individuals that are not coming to court. They're afraid to come to court. We have domestic violence cases, victims who are not reporting cases. They're afraid to go to, you see where they're arresting them outside of immigration court. And that's not really the purpose of the law. We want them to comply. We want them to come to court. And we're seeing that as a criminal defense attorney, I see this every single day. People are afraid, they don't want to come to court. And what happens is it becomes a greater problem. Now they're not entering, they're not having the day in court, so to speak, the trial. They're not entering their pleas. And therefore now there's a warrant. I'll send a warrant for these individuals.
So just to clarify, we could see more of these charges dropped against these, some of these folks who were arrested under this law in the period when the judge said you should not be arresting people under this.
That is correct. Again, most of the individuals were being held in custody. They had either no bond or very high bond, or they had an ICE hold that they were not bailing out. So they've been in custody all this time. That is correct. We're seeing them that they're actually getting dismissed now. But, one thing that was very particular about this case, and I think it was perhaps not received the attention it deserved, that it required a minimum of 9 months in jail. I mean, it's a misdemeanor, first-degree misdemeanor, punishable by 12 months maximum. But the statute said actually they required 9 months in jail, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to have that kind of mandatory minimum for this type of charge when you look in comparison to other, DUIs, prostitution, possession of any kind of drugs, which absolutely have no minimum whatsoever.
So with those cases being, many of those cases being dismissed, the Attorney General's actions here could, in continuing those arrests, could continue or could come back to kind of bite them.
Right, and the question is, were they arrested after there was the injunction? And there are legal civil lawsuits, my understanding, that are going on right now. If they were arrested after this temporary injunction was in place.
Okay, it's going to be interesting to see where things go from here. Jose Rivas, we always appreciate you joining us. You always give us a lot of good information.